So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, very distinguished gentleman with a long career in our construction industry. Edd Gibson is the president CEO of the National Academy of Construction, having held that position since January 2023. He's also professor emeritus at the Construction Management and Engineering in the Delhi Webb School of Construction at Arizona State University, having retired from academia in 2022. He spent 8 years as an Army officer and positions in industry before embarking on a 34-year successful career as a faculty member, holding endowed positions at University of Texas Austin, the University of Alabama, and then Arizona State University. From 2010 to 2018, he served as director of the School of Sustainable Engineering and the Built Environment at Arizona State University, overseeing 6 academic programs and over 1,700 students. He has supervised over 125 master's and doctorate students and has been president of the Architectural Engineering Institute of the American Society of Civil Engineers, ASCE, in 2006-2007, and was elected distinguished member of ASCE in 2020. He also served as a Fulbright Fellow in Norway in 2004. He was a visiting academic fellow at Cambridge University in spring 2019. He was awarded the 2016 ASCE Purifor Award for Outstanding Research and the NAC Richard L. Tucker Service Award in 2020. In 2022, he was honored with the Richard L. Tucker Leadership and Service Award from CII for his work in the Institute from 1988 to 2019. Ed is a licensed engineer in Texas, and I can probably go on all morning talking about his acclimates, but I think I'm running out of time. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Edd Gibson.
Thank you very much to USC CMAA, and we do have a relationship with the National Academies of Engineering. I did want to point out the sponsors for our symposia today, and you can kind of see those companies here who've given funding to help us put these on over this spring, and we're very, very appreciative of them as well. And thank you for your attendance and support today. So a little bit about the National Academy of Construction. It was established in 1999, really as an organization across all sectors of the construction industry, not just engineers, but constructors, lawyers, people in the surety industry, subcontractors, and so on and so forth. And the whole point was to honor those people, because there really wasn't a way to honor those folks nationally in the U.S., but also to take that embodied knowledge and try to improve our industry. We have about 475 members right now. And so first we honor, secondly we provide our collective knowledge, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. And then the thought process is also to build the next generation of leaders, which is part of why we're doing this. We want to make sure that those leaders who are in our undergraduate education and graduate education come out with a set of skills and knowledge, first to keep them out of trouble, but secondly to help them come in and help other companies as we move forward. Real quick safety moment. I think if we have some kind of an event, it's pretty easy to find the exits. We would exit the building and rally outside over here on this street or in this patio area. Hopefully we don't have anything like that happens. I did want to talk a little bit about a safety moment, though, that I think is really important, and it kind of sets the theme for what we're talking about today. Many of you may have seen this pyramid. It's called the Heinrich Pyramid, and came from, I think, the 30s, and then it was looked at by a guy named Bird in the 60s at DuPont, and basically analyzing data showed that there are 60 unsafe acts or first aid incidents for every 30 serious incidents, for every fatality in our industry. And what happened is a lot of people focused on those 600, and we've done a good job in reducing minor issues and so on and so forth. But what we found, and I'll show you the data in just a moment, what we found is if you don't step outside the box, if you don't have training, if it's not a fully engaged group of constructors from the field level all the way through senior management, then we don't hit the fatalities. We don't find the catastrophic events as much as we should. And so, the question is, do you and your people have the right safety IQ? Which means that we're thinking both of minor issues. We're not taking anything for granted in terms of unsafe actions and decisions, but we're also looking at high energy issues, potential for catastrophic failure, and so on and so forth. And there's a reason for doing that. And if we look at the U.S., most of you are very familiar with these numbers. If you're not, and it's a surprise to you, then become familiar with these numbers. 8% of the U.S. workforce, about 10 million people in our construction industry, but 22% of the fatalities in the U.S. every year on average. About 1,000 deaths annually for the last 25 years. About 170,000 serious injuries. And basically it's stagnant. And so we need to take steps to do things differently. I think it was Joseph Duran who said, if you keep on doing the same things the same way and expect to change, then you're crazy. So we've got to do some things differently. Just not to bore you too much with statistics, but in 2023, workplace fatalities in the construction industries were at 1,075, which was the highest number of fatalities since 2007. And if we looked at the number of fatalities in construction between 2002 and 2023, if you're into statistical process control, this process is in control. It's just stagnant. It's right there. Our process says we're going to kill 1,000 people a year. And I just don't find that acceptable, because those people have families and kids, and they have a life out in front of them. If you look at the data spread out over that time, 22,603 fatalities, so we're averaging about 1,000 a year. And it goes up and down a little bit, and typically that has to do with how much construction is put in place. But, we need to do something. And one place is trying to get this more into our classroom and prepare our students who are going to be out there and be leaders to be leaders in safety. The good news is we're not the most hazardous industry. We're number 3. And so about 10 fatalities per 100,000 workers. And there's a reason for that. Our industry has a lot of hazards. And we see that play out in the news a lot. And so it's just something to keep in mind. The rate of fatalities, and the one to look at here is the blue line kind of in the middle with the squares. It's absolutely flat, about 10 fatalities per 100,000 workers. And this data is about 15 years worth of data, and it's stayed flat as we've moved forward. One thing that's pretty interesting is that if we looked at the number of fatalities by business size, about 87% of the fatalities are in companies that are 99 employees or less. That includes subcontractors, general contractors, and so on. And what I would submit to you is that many of our students go to work for those companies. They go to work for small companies so they can have an inordinate impact if they understand safety culture and safety systems to try to improve those things. But still 13% of fatalities happen with companies that have over 100 employees. So it's still happening even there. And hazardous exposure will not go away. Exposure to hazardous equipment, typically the green is at least once a week, distracting or uncomfortable noise. The green is once a week, and so on. So the industry does have a tendency to put us in harm's way or potential harm's way, and that's not going to change. Perhaps it might get a little better, but we still are going to have those situations. I think another thing that is really interesting, and this is 2022 number, 5,300. So the rate of death by suicide in the construction industry was 53.3 per 100,000 workers in 2022. That's 5 times the rate of death through industrial accident in the construction industry. And so it had the highest suicide rate for both men and women of any industry sector. And interestingly enough, architecture and engineering, design were in the top 12 occupations experience in suicides. You can see some of the other results there. 84% of employees in 2022 reported at least one mental health challenge. And so this is part of what we're talking about with safety culture, safety and health culture and mental health culture. And I know Bill's going to talk a little bit about that later. And certainly there are a lot of factors that play into that as we move forward. And so having our students and undergrads and grad students understand this and have the ability to move forward with it is really important. We'll make sure I get in on time. So the good news, and I think it is really good news, is that both research and industry experience show that injuries and fatalities do not have to occur. Many companies work millions of hours without serious injury, fatality, and sometimes even recordable injuries, fairly minor injuries. And there's a way to do that, and it's combining good safety systems and discipline in the way we approach the jobs with a safety culture that goes from the top of the organization to the very bottom and says that every employee is valued and every employee is involved in making sure that no one else doesn't go home that afternoon. And I think our professional codes of ethics, in fact, I know they do, clearly state as engineers and as constructors, we have an obligation to safety and health of the public, which includes our workforce, both during design and construction. You'll hear a little bit about prevention through design a little bit later today. So the goal today really is to bring the supply side of future leaders, the educational part, with the demand side of future leaders, the industry. And I know we have a lot of industry folks today, so that we can bring out a step change in our industry. Just think if we could reduce the number of fatalities in half. That's still too many, but we have to attack it from many different places, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about technology maybe as a driver as well today. So you may ask, what's safety culture? This is our definition of safety culture at NAC. It's an all-employee system. I think that's the most important phrase, where we share in beliefs and practices to help shape our behavior, the soft side of things, to drive the way in which all work is performed. I know I had a safety director for Mortensen come talk to my class one time, and one of the things when I was at ASU as a faculty member, one of the things that struck me during that presentation, he said, the only way to do something is the safe way. And so everything is planned ahead of time. We don't take chances. We keep our people out of harm's way. And they had at the time done 1.5 million hours in the Phoenix area without a lost workday, without a recordable incident, made completely zero for 1.5 million hours. So we've had some of these safety symposia in the past. I know Elias is here. He attended one in Boulder, and Ken's been to a number of these. You can kind of see when these happened in the past. We learned a lot from these, and we're doing this again, as Urson showed a little bit earlier. And some of the things that we learned from those symposia, how do you embed safety and safety culture into in-class? It doesn't have to be necessarily a separate class devoted to safety, even though it can be, but it's making sure that safety content is in multiple classes, and many times that's not hard to do. when we're teaching students about things, asking them to really think about how you would approach safety here. Develop case studies, which we're working on a little bit now at NAC. Get guest speakers from industry, which hopefully our academic folk here can develop some networks. Include safety into projects and assignments as one question or two questions about what we're doing as we're doing the assignments. And then do a job hazard analysis for each laboratory that's conducted, which is kind of a neat way to do it. It becomes part of how we focus on work to happen ahead of time. But safety culture is beyond the classroom. Field trips, safety competitions, OSHA training for all students, whether it's a class or providing opportunities for all of our students to take their OSHA 10 or 30 cards. At ASU, and I know in a lot of other places, we provided PPE for students as they entered the program in a ceremony. We handed them a vest and safety glasses and gloves and stuff like that. And because we knew they were going to be on the job site in their first semester as part of field trips. There are a lot of barriers, and some of those are listed here. I think one of the big barriers is many faculty have no background in safety. They're very good at finite analysis or doing hydrological calculations and those kind of things, but they've never really been exposed to this. Certainly it's hard to make room in existing curriculum. There's a lot of pushback on that. How do you motivate faculty to do that? Well, hopefully the statistics that I've shown help with that, but it's something that we keep in front of us. On your table, there are actually a couple of handouts. And one of those is that at NAC, since our symposia 2 years ago, we actually wrote a number of executive insights on safety culture. And there's background information. We also have 8 Get the Knack podcasts on safety culture. And so these are available for free, and you can listen in on them. You can download these things and use them. You see the 19 understanding safety culture, audits and surveys, gaining buy-in from employees, and so on. These are all subjects that we're going to probably talk about today. And those are available, and we very much encourage you to go in and look at those and use those perhaps in the classroom or perhaps, in your companies. We also publish proceedings from the first set of symposia. You can see where that is now. Please download that. It has a lot of other ideas that I didn't show, and I think that's kind of where we're coming from there. And so that's pretty much, the intro. Sorry it was kind of stark statistics, but I think it's worthwhile for us to review those, and then it serves as a good path forward. So please use the material that's here. One other thing that's in this handout is on the first page, which is a little encapsulated thing that was written by Jack Tollner, who's a member of NAC. He was the senior safety director for ExxonMobil for a number of years. And it really kind of gives a personal story of why he thinks we should teach undergraduates and graduate students safety culture education. And you can kind of see that reading through it. It's a personal story that he experienced. And I know many of us that started in the industry in the 70s and 80s, it was, okay, go be safe, watch out for yourself, talk to other people. There really wasn't a system in place to help protect us. So that's all I have this morning.